The mixed race families, that is something you said you've listened to the program. Obviously, you know that's something that we focus on and think is super important. Before I even get to that, extremely important, I hope we can, as much honesty as possible, have you ever engaged in sexual intercourse with a non-white person?
Yes.
Okay. Male, female?
Male.
I'm sorry?
Male.
Male, okay. Are you currently engaged in a sexual relationship with a non-white person?
Nope.
Okay. This program, I have concluded, just based on logic, that if indeed there is a system of white supremacy, that sexual intercourse between white people and non-white people is incorrect, and the white person, they are practicing racism because they are taking advantage of a non-white person that is in a weak position, and that sex act, it just confuses the non-white person about what it means to be white. That person certainly is going to have a difficult time thinking of a white person as a racist if they're engaged sexually with them. It just really confuses their ability to understand what's happening with regards to race, and I've concluded that is a major maximum act of racism. What is your response to that logic?
Logically, it makes sense. Logically, it makes sense, and it makes sense in the same way that migrant NGOs that are funded by white governments can't speak, can't think outside of the agenda that's set for them. I at the same time, I see around me all the time black-white relationships, and some of those are, and the ones that I see most often are where the white person is usually engaged in some form of anti-racism work or activism or something, and attempting to unsettle that. But we've just talked about how difficult it is to work or to think outside of white supremacy when you're a white person. So, I can't sit here as a white person and say I condemn black-white marriages or relationships. But I totally understand why you do. Because I see them all around me, and I have friends who are engaged in those relationships, so I can't sit here and condemn them. I can't. But logically, I agree with your position.
I will get in one just for some of the folks that are listening who would hear this, and given your response that you have had sexual intercourse with a non-white person, non-white male, and then you go out and do this work and go to conferences and talk to black people and are staffed in positions where you're around a lot of black people, that it would be very easy for you to manipulate other black people that you're around, for them to think that you are a well-meaning white person, that you're not like the other white people, that you are special, that you are not racist. It would be very easy for you to manipulate black people in that environment, sexually and or otherwise, just in terms of manipulating how they think of you, and being able to just get a lot of, what would they call it, get a great psychological boost by being around all of these black people who think so well of you. How would you respond to that?
That's a real danger. That is a real danger, because if I become reliant on that, that would become the modus operandi for my work. And I've come away from conferences feeling good because of that. But at the end of the day, I have to sit down and do this work, which is about analysing racist incidents and why they happen. And if I go to conferences and present the work, it's so that it can develop and get better. And so I have to present to black audiences, I have to present to white audiences, and I have to be personable and likeable, to be invited to places, to have those opportunities. But no, yes, it's a danger for any white activist or academic working in this area, is to somehow feel special as a result of the work you do, and that's a danger that you have to, something that you have to reflect on and try to step away from, and that's really difficult, as you can imagine, really difficult. But that's that's not a struggle that's even worth talking about, is it? You know, it's a minor thing. It's a minor thing.
That is racism, white supremacy, right there.
What's that?
Just your that is a hashtag, I believe they have, white problems.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean. It's you know, I try to not do it, but let's, you know, just I'll spend time talking about it because it's not worth it.
Right on.
But I think some of the people in here do want to hear some of this, because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to be dealing with people just like the lady back there. She is still a member, maybe not in good standing, of the greatest force on this planet in the form of people. Don't forget that. This lady said she was white. You might say that don't mean nothing to you. You know that you are not telling the truth when you say that. She's a member of an organized force, or she's at least associated with it, even though she's saying that she wants to get disassociated with it. But what did I say at the beginning of this talk? The white people who don't believe in racism are not among the smartest, which means that they won't know how to deal with it either. The lady has said, didn't you say that you came in here to try to learn something? I'm quite sure
right.
You're here for a reason.
Right.
Is that the reason?
Yeah.
You didn't exactly say that, but I help you along.
Right.
I have to remember that.
Right.
Okay? But the best people to learn from are the people that you're running from, because that's where the work has to be done. See, you might can solve your individual problem, and at some point, one way that you may do it is hook up with somebody non-white in a sexual way.
I'd like that.
You like that? I thought you would.
I mean,
now, according to the code, okay, be quiet, everybody. Everybody be calm. According to counter-racist logic, if you, or if you have ever, or if you do, or if you're planning on it, having sexual intercourse or engaging in any kind of sexual play with a non-white person anywhere on this planet during the existence of white supremacy, you are not running away from what it is you say you're trying to get away from. You have wholesalely, in the worst way, taken a person who is already a victim and victimized that person to the nth degree. There is no act that you can commit that's worse than that. The black person would be better off if you put a gun to their head and killed them, because at least that would send a message to the rest of them to stay alert. If you do this sexual thing, it will put the rest of them to sleep, and they will go further into the confusion. And that has been proven over and over and over and over and over again. So I'm duty bound to tell you, hold it, this is science. I'm duty bound to tell you this because this is truth. Now, you may emotionally have this inclination. You have to kill it.
Well, I'm married to a white man, but I'm just saying, I find black men very attractive, too.
Yes,
but
I can understand that. This happens all down through history. White men have it more than you. Probably including the one that you have, if he ever went to Nam or someplace.
Yeah, he was.
He's got a long record. You say yes?
He was in Vietnam.
He was in Vietnam.
Right.
Oh, okay. Hoochie House. Okay, maybe.
Right.
I don't know. All right. But one thing that white men do everywhere they go is make sure that they run through the black females, and then after they finish with them, they dump them and turn them over to us. Okay?
But what can we do as white
What
people?
can you do? That's the question. Excellent question. Best question in the house. You can go among the white people and start taking those hits that you're going to get when you start talking the way that you talk and start saying you want them to settle this problem, because that's where it has to be settled. The reason we talk among ourselves is because how many white people like yourself are going to walk in here and fess up?
Well, I think more would, but like a lot of my friends, like if I say, let's go to this black restaurant, they say, oh, they don't want us there or something. And they feel like they'll be looked down on in black, you know.
It depends on what you're there for.
Yeah.
What are you there for? You're going to a black restaurant. You like the food? What do they serve there that you like? Have you ever been to a black restaurant?
Yeah.
Did you eat the food?
Yeah.
What did you eat?
I had blackened salmon.
You had what?
Blackened salmon.
Blackened salmon.
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
Potatoes and cauliflower.
You can get that where you were, right?
Right.
Of course, that's usually not what black people call, soul food.
Right.
Which is something that'll kill you.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Which is an excellent name for it.
Right.
Chitlins, collard greens, something, black-eyed peas. Black people were fed this on the plantation. You feed them what you feed the horses and cows. Even down and out white people in Appalachia would eat part of that hog, but they call it eating what? High on the hog. Then they take those chitlins, rip them out at the rear end of that pig, throw them out there at about the back door into the mud, and here comes Sam, because he ain't had nothing to eat. He'll eat the bark off of a tree. And he gather up them chitlins and put them in a pot and cook them, and over a period of time, he likes them. So even when he and she are wearing fur coats, they'll set up in the fanciest restaurant in New York or Paris and order chitlins, and having all that poison run out of their ears. It's not the healthiest food. So your going to the restaurant is not an improvement either. Correct or incorrect?
Well, I think what you said about talking to other white people is probably the best thing to do, because I do find when I express these views to other white people, I think that's more productive than expressing them to black people, because a lot of white people don't.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying, and I'm going to try to wrap this up for this part. That's the point that I'm making. You have to go among the white people. Now, you can have sex with your black mate, but only after white supremacy has been eliminated in all of these areas of activity. If you do it any time before then, you are committing one of the worst crimes on earth, because you have just messed up another black person's mind. And that black person becomes fit for nothing. That's going to help black people and the people that need help the most on this planet in the long run. That's almost a guarantee. Becomes completely devoted to something that's not going to be of help to the people that need help the most. Justice is about helping the people that need help the most.
Okay. I just got to follow up real quick. I believe in this broadcast you did admit that you say you are a white person and you are a racist. Is that accurate?
I said that earlier in the show, and I would confirm that is true.
Okay. I guess it seems like you're attempting to be somewhat honest and as honest as you can be. I hope this carries on to my next question. I wanted to know.
Oh boy.
Are you now, or have you ever been in a sexual relationship with a black person?
I have, and I am. That's an honest answer to your question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I have been, and I am currently.
You have been, and you are currently having sex with a black non-white person. Is that correct?
Yeah. Let me rephrase my question. Or rephrase my answer. I am in have in the past, and I am currently in an intimate physical relationship with a black person. That's correct.
Wow.
To be clear, my wife is black.
Does she know that you're a racist?
Yeah, she's standing beside me right here. She's hearing this whole conversation.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to know. Appreciate it.
No problem.
And I would recommend everyone read this book, Pieces of a Puzzle by Renethia Tate.
I have it.
Okay. I haven't finished it, but I do remember one thing that she said, I think, and that was that she interviewed a lot of white males regarding black women and this and that. And I think this one white male she asked a question something like, why do you think black women to get involved with you, or why do you think they agree to be sexually involved with you? And I believe he said because they're afraid to say no, afraid not to. And one thing I have noticed, at least within my own family and social circle, is most of the black women who are involved with white men have been white identified. And I will say this about white men: they don't get involved, in my opinion, with black women who are not willing to succumb and submit to white supremacy. So I'm not surprised he had a non-white female, a black female next to him who was listening to this. She would not be with him if she was not somebody that he felt comfortable with. So, and somebody who didn't feel comfortable with being with a racist, she wouldn't be with him in the first place. So I think they white males who get involved with black females, they pick very well, as opposed to black and non-white people who pick white people. They don't often pick very well. But white people are very good at picking black people that they can be involved with, in my opinion.
See, this would be a first for the cows to have these people on the show and get a conversation, because we've never had a white, non-white couple on the show where they could explain their relationship and the dynamics. So it would be very interesting if he would agree for him and his wife to come on, and, you and Justice, even if they want to keep it a closed session just between you and Justice, that would be fine, but we could hear the dynamics between the two.
I will ask, but I will report. I mean, it's true. It's true. Gus was asked, or I guess let me rewind and give context for how all this came out in the first place. When I spoke with Mr. Sheen via email, he went to check the show. I sent him 2 programs, and then he went to look online, and he found my blog. And he saw Tim Wise. He's like, oh, okay, you should have just said that from jump. Tim Wise is great. And then he continued to read, and he was like, oh, wait a minute. You got this thing on your blog about non-white people not having sex with white people. Wait a minute. And we had to have a conversation, and he was honest. He had said on the phone, he said, I'm a racist. I'm white. I'm racist, of course. And we talked about Tim Wise, and then he said, so this sad thing about not having sex with white people. And, I explained my position. I gave the prisoner analogy, that white people make rules against having sexual intercourse where there's an unequal power dynamic. And he listened, and he said, wow, that makes sense. It's very logical, and, I understand what you're saying, and, yeah, it's accurate, it's logical, it makes total sense. But my wife is black, and I don't want to talk about this on the program. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And so now I'm thinking like, oh, now I'm being asked to keep white people's secrets. And so I'm thinking, okay, so, are you practicing racism in the relationship? Do you see, this racism right there in, the bedroom, ostensibly, the kitchen, or wherever else you all are? And he says, oh, yeah, of course. I mean, how could it not be there? And I'm like, wow. And you don't want to talk about this on the program. He said, nope. Thought very interesting. I had quite a moral dilemma about how to handle that, but I'm glad it came out on the program. I'm glad it came out on the program anyway. That was the hope that I had, that it would come out and I wouldn't have to say anything, so I could keep my agreement and it would still come out.
Have you ever engaged in sexual intercourse with a black person?
Yes, I have.
Okay. You have read Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.'s book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. In that book, Mr. Fuller, he says that, I'm just going to read what he has written here from his definitions. Maximum act of racist aggression. Pulling that up. Okay. Maximum racist aggression. This is number 3 that qualifies as maximum racist aggression. An act of sexual intercourse and or sexual play between a white person and a non-white person during any period in which any person is subject to white supremacy any place in the known universe. I assume, since you've read the book, this is not the first time that you have heard this. Is that correct?
That's correct, which on the main page for your show, you had quoted part of my blog that I had written right after I had read that book, which it kind of put me into this mindset of wondering about myself and wondering, like I said, a year ago, I would have said, oh, no, absolutely, I'm not racist, but that was one of the major things that made me start thinking and reconsidering and wondering if I'm really, doing something wrong.
He doesn't just say that this is, incorrect. He says this is a maximum act of racist aggression. And in fact, one of the other definitions or terms and definitions that he has to this behavior, an adulterer, the definition that he has in the code book for an adulterer is a white supremacist. And then if you go down a little bit further, it is any white person who engages in sexual intercourse and or sexual play with any non-white person during any period in which any person is directly or indirectly subject to white supremacy any place in the known universe. He's not just saying that this is a little bit incorrect or maybe shouldn't happen. He's saying this is the worst thing a white person can do to a black person under the system of white supremacy. I mean, that's heavyweight. Do you think he's accurate in what he's saying?
I don't know. I think, everybody likes to think, oh, I'm different, I'm special. So I've always thought, oh, well, most white women who are in relationships with black men are racist, but that's not me. I'm different. But that book made me think and say, am I really that different? Am I really that special that I could sit there and say, oh, well, it's okay for me, but not for other people? So it's gotten me to the point where I'm kind of questioning myself and wondering, what do I do myself? Am I really, contributing to the problem even more than anybody else? And I'm sitting there talking against it in other cases, but am I doing the same thing? I don't know if I'm making sense.
I'll let the listeners judge if you are making sense as a suspected white supremacist. The blog, I want to read that portion for any of the folks who are listening and you're not listening at Blog Talk Radio or you were not able to read the description. This is on her blog, and you can just click the link where it says blog, and it'll take you to her blog site. You can read this particular post, and she has a lot of other posts that are about racism. It says, Neely Fuller Jr. basically says that if you are white and you are romantically, sexually involved with a non-white person, you are guilty of being the worst kind of racist. He likens it to an adult being involved with a child because of the power differential. He says that a white person who is romantically connected with a non-white person is contributing to that person's confusion and self-hatred, and that any children produced from that union will be hopelessly lost in terms of self-identity. I want to just go paragraph by paragraph and kind of get your feedback. Just the paragraph that I just read, do you see the logic in what he's saying, particularly when he likens a white person like yourself engaging in sexual intercourse with a black person to pedophilia, an adult engaging in sexual intercourse with a child? Do you see the logic in what he's saying?
I do see it, and I actually, someone who read my blog actually sent me a book that I absolutely did not want to read just because of the title, but after reading it, I started thinking on this even more. It was called Why Black Men Love White Women, and it was basically talking about the historical things, the historical facts, and the racism and all of the psychological trauma that contributes to interracial relationships. And that made me think about it even more and start questioning even more, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Am I a racist?
I'm sorry?
That was a question. Am I a racist? Did that pop into your head? Am I practicing racism, white supremacy in the worst way by engaging in sexual intercourse with a black person? Did that thought pop into your mind?
Absolutely.
Okay. That book is by Rajan Persad, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. He has been on this program as well, just for folks who are listening. He was here back in May, courtesy of 818. Her blog is ebonynewschannel.blogspot.com. But we had a pretty interesting conversation. We talked about that book that you mentioned, Rajan Persad, May 2010. Wow. I hope folks listening in think about that. She did say it was logical, Mr. Fuller, likening this behavior to pedophilia. So did you think, wow, logic, if the logic of this is accurate, did you think, wow, he's likening me to a pedophile? What do you think about that?
I don't know. It kind of, again, it just makes me more contemplative and more thinking about things, and I'm kind of lost. I'm kind of just lost. I don't know what to do, where to go, what I can do to make things better and change things, you know?
Not have sex with black people?
That's true, yes. I guess that would be the only choice, yeah. But then I also can't see myself being with a white person just because I can't see myself being with someone who is actively practicing racism and has no problems with it. And most of the white people I know, they will deny practicing racism. It won't even cross their mind, but then they'll go ahead and say something blatantly racist.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking this is just like you. In my view, having sex with a black person is a blatant maximum act of racism. You said yourself that a year ago you would have done the same thing, said absolutely not, I'm not a racist. And even today you still have not said, yeah, I believe I'm a racist. I'm definitely doing things to mistreat people who are not black. The shoe seems to fit you as well, do you think?
To a degree, yes.
Many of our UK listeners, that's a point that they raise pretty frequently, that now, as you said, it's almost a fashion statement to get with a black male, and we have this mixed race or interracial relationship, and many of our UK listeners who are black, non-white, in their view, this is an impediment
to being able to recognize the current systemic structural racism, white supremacy that still exists, because people say, well, we don't have this as a problem anymore. See, look at all this tolerance and look at all these interracial relationships and dual heritage people. This isn't a big problem. What is your view on that?
Well, I think that's complete nonsense, because to me, integration is when two cultures of relatively equal power choose to mix with one another. But if you look around the world, generally the groups of people that have power in this world, people of Chinese origin, let's say, a lot of our South Asian brothers and sisters, even among the South Asian community, right, we tend to homogenize them. The Bengalis and the Hindus, maybe Gujaratis, for example, the different groups of South Asian communities even have an issue mixing with one another, because they want to maintain, and not because of xenophobia necessarily, because they want to maintain their own cultural scenario. Like I got a friend, I don't want to hype him up on air, I won't say his name, but he's Gujarati, his girlfriend's Punjabi. He still hasn't told his parents, because even though they're both Indian, in his community, he knows his parents want him to be with someone who's also Gujarati. In the black community, particularly the black Caribbean community, more so than the black African community, though increasingly African communities, we have, a situation where the majority of the men particularly, or at least 50%, are dating white women. To me, even as someone of mixed heritage, we've got to examine the psychology of why that would be, that a group of people, we're not dating, let's be clear, black men in this country are not dating Asian women or Chinese women, of which there are many in London, to the same degree. Why is it the one particular group of women we seem to be going for, not myself per se, but I'm just meaning this general fashion we're talking about, is white women? What is it, when we look at Fanon and other black psychologists who've written about our internalization of self-hatred, how much does that feed into the relationships, and how much does white people's contempt, or the contempt they're taught to have for black people, also feed into an imbalance within the relationship? So I don't think just because people are having sex that means that they're committed to the defeat of racism often. And you can even love someone but still be racist, and that's what's so complicated. I've seen boys grow up together in London, because London isn't like New York, for example. We have segregation to a degree, but there's nowhere you can go in London where there's literally no white people. We had that in the 80s. And like Brixton in the 80s, you could count the white people. Whereas now it's much more mixed up in terms of where we live geographically. But in terms of our experiences, it's still the black boys in prison overwhelmingly. It's still black boys getting harassed by the police and killed by the police overwhelmingly. So to me, if the people that are having mixed race relationships are not helping the fight, then they are, by definition, accomplices of that racism, right? You've got black children or dual heritage children, who are also victims of police brutality, are also overrepresented in the police system. But you want to ignore that and claim that racism is just about, who goes to bed together. I don't buy that at all. And I think actually the black community in this country's choice to overwhelmingly date white women is a symptom of racism, not a symptom of racism being cured. Even as someone who's a product of that, I can see how those internalizations feed into these relationships. That's not me saying no black person and no white person ever in history have loved one another, but I'm just saying when you witness a phenomenon like that is so overwhelming, there's got to be something else going on that isn't just to do with love.
Well said. I could not agree more.
You reference Frantz Fanon's work quite a bit in your book, or at least in Red, White, and Black. At this point, I guess when I read Frantz Fanon, when I hear people reference Frantz Fanon, I think about it in a very different way. I think the first two times that I read Black Skin, White Mask, I didn't know Frantz Fanon married a white person. When I went back and read his work, knowing that, it was a totally different read. I got a lot more information out of it. I saw some contradictions where it seemed like he was kind of chastising some black people for wanting to marry a white person or wanting to be with a white person, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, he married, wait a minute now. It was a very different read looking at his material, and at this point I've noted that many white people, even at the collegiate level, they seem very comfortable with Frantz Fanon. I see his work on many syllabi, where white people want to talk about Wretched of the Earth, they want to talk about Black Skin, White Mask, just devote a lot of time and energy to studying his life and times, and what a great thinker he was in terms of trying to grapple with the problem of white supremacy. And I just, at this point, I think a lot of that comfort is around this guy married a white person, and that, in my opinion, that does a lot to erode a non-white person, particularly a black person. It does a lot to erode the sincerity of this person saying that I'm really against racism, white supremacy. And I would say that especially with Fanon, who's saying violence. That's what it's going to take. Violence. I think that's a big part of Wretched of the Earth, embracing that, black people embracing that as using violence to combat racist man and racist woman. And for me, that rings very hollow if the person saying this is married to a white person. I don't think he's going to kill his wife on a victim. I'm just pointing that out. I am concerned. I think Malcolm X says anything that makes white people happy, I have great concerns, and I've just a lot of white people.
Yes.
Sorry. I was just going to say that you were breaking up a little bit at the beginning there. I was hoping we could, because I want to make sure we got this. I heard you said that you were in agreement, and then you kind of went out a little bit.
Yes. So I want to understand that the part that you were saying about the optimism and the joy that white scholars and white activists get from Fanon is really disturbing to me also. And it's my way of addressing it is to try to show how many people are ignoring some of the more difficult parts of his work, or just misappropriating him. But I do share that criticism that you just laid out.
Okay. Yeah, that, as I said, when I first was introduced to his work, I didn't know he married a white person, and that radically changed how I read his material, and it changed everything about how I thought about him when I got that information. And one of the trends that I have noted, it seems that white people are aware, at least the ones that I've talked to, they are aware. Yes, I know he married a white person, even though they might not, bring that out in the forefront when they discuss his work. They tend to be aware. Black people they tend not to be aware. I feel like I've met and talked to many, many more black people. That was news to them, finding out that he was married to a white person. And for me, that further increases concerns that I have, because when I hear white people discuss his work and talk, that seems to be one of the convenient tidbits that they leave out.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. Exactly.
Just putting it out, but you said you have similar concerns, so I'm glad that's out. Maybe more people will think about that. Anybody who's at the collegiate level, if you're in any classes where Fanon's work comes up, pay attention to that, because I've seen that trend a lot in classes. I even sat in one class where they discussed black skin, white mask in detail. And I attempted to add, well, wait a minute now, we got a whole book about this sex thing. He married a white person. Are we going to talk about that? And the white professor got angry. I don't want to talk about that at all. And she stormed out. And I was like, wait, I thought this is relevant. This is not, me trying to hijack the class. Isn't this relevant to what he talked about in the book? And there was no space for that conversation at all. It was a total brick wall, which just that further added to my suspicions around how his work is being used. And I guess I'll also add, I have seen a trend where this happens a lot to victims once they have passed on. Vultures, racist man and racist woman, to just come in and kind of nitpick, take out what they want, take things out of context, particularly after someone has passed on.
You wrote about, it's on your website, folks can check out some of the different posts where you write about race, but you said, I have had, a grueling 1.5-year education from my fast-tongued and politically fiery black South African girlfriend to boot. You actually have a couple posts where you talk about, I guess, what people would call interracial dating, interracial relationships in South Africa, how you don't see too much of this in South Africa, and that sometimes if you do see it, people are, oh my gosh, look at that, it's a white guy with a black female, or vice versa, what have you. However, it's manifested, and you've almost got to the point where you're like, man, if you're gonna stare and gawk at that level, give us 20 rand and you can take a picture, what have you. In terms of you as a white man, and you even write about how there is a lot of racist fetishizing of black bodies, male and female, where that seems to be one of the things where the white tourist can come to Africa, any part of it, and, oh yes, I can have some sort of sexual liaison with a black person, and that will, get to my roots, or that will help me cleanse from my racism, or I've had an authentic African experience. And you said that, what you and your partner have experienced is not that at all, that you had previously pretty much only dated white females, and that it had nothing to do with her being a black female, just you all hit it off and, ended up having a quality relationship. Is that an accurate summation?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite an old post, the one you quoted. So we've been together for about 4 years now, coming up to 4 years. And I think that, it is, and I'm sure I've said this in my post, I think that, it's something that we kind of confront together as a couple fairly regularly, is this sort of, that we are, I think in South Africa, in a pretty small number of people, where it's what you might call a sort of genuine relationship, where there isn't sort of a whole lot of other stuff that kind of plays into it, whether that is some kind of fetish on the one side or the other, or possibly an aspect where it's about money, or it's about this idea, and it works both ways. I mean, I think, and I'm sure I said this in one of the articles at least as well, is that often there's an assumption, say from the black point of view, that like, oh, if I'm with a white guy, he'll treat me better, because the racism also obviously plays into the black community, and there's an assumption even in many black areas and black communities that white men are better than black men. So I would like to think that we are. No, I mean, I'm sure that we are. Yeah, it's a good. We have a good relationship, and as I said in one of the articles again, that our race doesn't kind of in any way define our relationship, but it also does make it interesting on a certain level, because we have different outlooks on the world that are to some degree formed by our different races, and also our experiences of the world have been in some way influenced by different races, and that's something where we can always learn from each other as well. So I think it's something interesting, but it's not something that in any way defines our relationship.
I certainly would take the position that racism, white supremacy, that is the definitive power dynamic on the planet. It is always going to be the definitive aspect of white people and non-white people interacting, relating, whether it's in some sort of sexual arrangement or not, just because we are in a global system of white supremacy. We talk here a lot about, number one, having an accurate understanding of racism, white supremacy, and then things that victims of white supremacy can and should do to end this system, replace it with a system of justice, things that we can do, or things that we should do, things that we shouldn't do. One of the things that we suggest all the time is non-white people not being engaged in any sort of sexual arrangement with a white person, because in a system of racism, white supremacy, that is incorrect behavior. The white person is always, whether it is a white man or a white woman, that white person is always taking advantage of that non-white person in that power dynamic, that is a colossal, a monumental act of white supremacy, that white person being sexually involved with a white person. If I was going to give a comparison, it would be the same thing as a Nazi during the Third Reich being sexually involved with a quote-unquote Jew. It would be the same power dynamic as a warden or a jailer being sexually involved with a prisoner. That white supremacy is a massively unequal power dynamic, that every single white person, you, Mr. Clark included, has way more power than non-white people, and frequently non-white people are very confused about racism, that you're really exploiting someone who is very, very confused, in addition to being in a much less powerful position, but very confused about what is happening with regards to racism, white people in general. Is that logical, what I've just said, in terms of why these tragic arrangements, white people being sexually involved with white people, is it logical? Does it make sense? Not do you agree with it per se, but just is it logical in terms of why I'm saying that these arrangements are incorrect and that they are inherently exploitive every time?
I don't agree, to be honest. I think that I think that there is.
I didn't ask if you agreed. I was very clear about that. I said, is it logical? If you want to give us why you disagree or agree, that's fine too. But is it logical?
Is it logical? I mean, I can understand the logic. Yes, if that's what you're asking. I mean, I can understand that it could be perceived that way. But I think, I find, I don't know. I suppose just you kind of lost me a bit when you started talking about the Nazis, like sort of, just to sort of take how I feel about my relationship and my partner, and how I think she feels about me and our relationship, and to in any way kind of draw a comparison with the Nazis is obviously a bit of a hard one to take on a personal level.
Why? I mean, not putting it on you personally. This is not even anything personal about you. This is just in general with the system of racism, white supremacy. What happened with Adolf Hitler, Nazi Germany? Would that not be a quintessential example of white supremacy in action?
No, of course it would.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's just what I'm citing. Illustrations of racism, white supremacy, and how that power dynamic operates. We agreed at the beginning of the program we are still globally in a system of white supremacy, South Africa, worldwide, yes?
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely not disagreeing with that, no.
Okay. And it would be logical if someone, Nazi Germany, if a Jewish person said, hey, we have monumental injustice going on here. I am not going to be sexually engaged with a Nazi under these conditions until this problem has been completely resolved to my satisfaction. That would make logical sense, yes?
Yes,
okay.
But, Nazis were people who, to whether or not, or whatever level they may or may not have been aware of what they were doing, were consciously inflicting, incredible violence upon Jewish people, and I just think it's a bit of an extreme example in if you're talking about kind of interracial relationships in a present day situation.
Do you think it would be accurate to say that white people worldwide as a collective are inflicting monumental violence directly and indirectly on non-white people worldwide presently, 2016? Is that accurate?
Yeah, but okay. I think that you're talking about Nazis versus, like, we're not talking about Germans, for example. You're talking about Nazis, a specific type of white person, for example, in that scenario. We're not talking, or a specific type of German. Not every German was a Nazi. So I think maybe the same case applies. I don't think that, you can, personally, I don't feel that you can say that every single white person is inflicting monumental violence on black people to the same degree, at least, in the same way. I mean, maybe, are we talking about white people still being part of a white supremacist system? Absolutely, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I just think it's always a bit, I don't know, drawing comparisons with Hitler and the Nazis in this particular instance. I just think that maybe is problematic.
I could pick out lots of different illustrations. I could use the analogy of slavery, whether it's the plantation master and the slave. I already gave the illustration of the warden. I even use the workplace, for example, because they do have rules and regulations. I know at least they do in the States. I don't know about South Africa, but I know they have rules and regulations about employers not being in sexual relationships with their employees. They have this in academic institutions as well. I know Harvard just made rules about this as well, where professors are not supposed to be involved in any sexual relationships with students, male or female, because there is an unequal power dynamic, and many folks who put these rules in place, they feel it is inherently exploitative. Do they have any such rules, regulations like that in South Africa, either in employment situations or academic settings?
I think obviously in schools and stuff, it's the same thing. In universities, I think it's generally a sort of unwritten rule. I don't think it's a kind of official policy, but I think that, there's a general feeling that, for example, university professors should not have sexual relations or whatever with students. Teachers and pupils, definitely. But I think that, I think that those. I still think that it's you're talking about a significantly broader kind of disparity in the power relation there, and I'm not talking about like all interracial relationships, but I'm just talking specifically about mine in this instance. I don't think that comparing, say, a university lecturer or a teacher and a student, and me and my partner is in any way a good comparison.
Why?
Because I don't think there is that kind of that greater difference in the power dynamic in our instances. I think that, and I think to consider it in any way exploitative is also kind of hugely undermines the agency of my partner in the situation, and it sort of assumes that she is in some way, the victim in the situation, and I think she would also take that as a great insult.
I've heard that before. Many people who are, unfortunately, in these arrangements. Is it accurate to say that your partner, this black female, that she is a victim of white supremacy? Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, of course she is.
Okay. And you are a white man, as we have already pointed out. Just even that right there, I would like folks to reflect on that. Anywhere on the planet in 2016, a white man and a black female, and if people think that there is a power differential between those two, anywhere in the world, Greenland, South Africa, Indonesia, Vietnam, Georgia, the state I was talking about, anywhere in the world, if people think they are on equal footing, white man, black female, anywhere in the world, you can think about that and come to your own conclusions. Right on. Very important point to keep in mind anytime there are discussions really about any area of people activity, but especially things that go down in the bedroom. Very important. Keep that in mind. Okay, just get some more background on how this whole topic came together, your book, Pieces of a Puzzle. You write in the book, and I thought this was fascinating because I've heard this before. I was hoping that you could tell them about the phone call that you had with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., where you had been talking with him, you all had been speaking about his book and his views on white supremacy, and there came a point where he asked you a question. Can you go into more detail about that conversation and what transpired?
Yes. He asked the question, have I ever slept with a white man? And at the time that he asked that question, I hung up the phone on him because I had buried the experience in the back of my mind. So when he asked that question, it's just my natural reaction was to hang up. And then after I hung up, I called him back and told him that I had experience with a white man, and he hurt me. And he merely said, I thought so. And so this is how this is part of the research too, but that's how I met him. When I met him, he asked that question because it's the one thing that black females will not talk about. I didn't talk about my experience either. I was quiet, but not knowing that I had buried it in the back of my mind. So the experience that we have with white men are sometimes buried. Just like my experience was buried in the back of my mind. Other black females who are not talking about it, it's not an everyday subject that we can just talk about. So it is the one thing that black females will not talk about. And like I said, and that's for many reasons that I found in the research. Most of us have not. I'm not going to say most of us, but we have had experiences that are embarrassing. We had experiences that makes us feel guilty, and we have had experiences that traumatized us that we have buried in our minds.
I can see a logic behind the idea that white supremacy could be abolished, could be ended, if one, white people did not have sexual intercourse with victims of white supremacy, and two, if white people did not have sexual intercourse with white supremacists.
Could you define white supremacy?
In my definition, I believe that white supremacy is the practice of oppressing others based on their status as non-white people.
Is this a global system, worldwide?
Is white supremacy a global system?
Yes, sir.
The practice of white supremacy encounters and affects people globally wherever white supremacist practices, you can edit this shit, white supremacist practices have influenced non-white cultures.
Okay. Do you think
are all white people
participate in the system of white supremacy?
I believe that all white people participate in the system of white supremacy.
Beautiful.
Would that make all white people white supremacists?
That's all I can do.
Would that